Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I'm excited for this one because number one, we actually just had like an hour-long meeting, so I'm geared up for already talking to these guys and stuff. But I've had both these individuals on the podcast on their own. So Paul Beets and Mike Margarella, and have both done a great job of talking about what they're doing and how they've been successful in Indianapolis investing. But they have started kind of venturing out into doing something else that we haven't really talked about on the pod yet, and I want to talk a little bit about their partnership and what they're doing, but then get into a little bit of the storage units. This is where they now have 3 storage units underway. They're going to be just storage unit moguls is basically what I'm gonna look at them in a couple of years. We're going to know them as that and stuff. But so we're going to talk about that today. But fellas, thanks a lot for joining me. So how's it going, Mike?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. Paul, how you doing today, man?
Doing good, man.
There you go. So I want to talk a little bit about, and like I said, you guys have both been on the pod individually, and you guys both mentioned each other and like kind of a friendship, a partnership, and a real estate investing connection that you guys made just with each other. So Mike's living in New York, Paul's living in Michigan. They're both investing in Indianapolis and doing some different stuff and like that. But you guys have developed this partnership that's still working out. So at first I was like, that's kind of an oddball connection, but it's been working out and doing pretty well. So Paul, how did this come about, and why is this working for you guys?
Yeah, so I'll let Mike tell his side of this, but my understanding is that I'm very active in the Facebook groups. Probably everybody knows of me if they don't know me. And I think Mike even saw my podcast with the Investor Pod.
Okay.
And so we ended up meeting up the out-of-state investor symposium. Mike was in town for that. And we met up at the Simple Wholesaling at Sun King Brewery there downtown. So his wife and my wife got along very well. Mike and I get along very well. My wife is always looking for friends that I like, because she likes everybody. So, I think it really was a friendship. Obviously they're interested in self-storage, or they're interested in real estate investing. They were wanting to invest in Indianapolis. And I had, been ahead of them from like a deal count. And they were really interested in getting started. And Mike's really dug in. So I'll let Mike tell his side of it.
That's awesome. And Mike, I believe too, when you guys first connected, like you had not done any deals in Indianapolis yet. That might've been actually your first time coming to Indianapolis. Is that right?
Yeah, that's all correct. And when we walked into Sun King, I saw Paul and we sat down. I was like, oh, you're that guy from Facebook. And he was. And, as Paul said, we kind of just hit it off, and we just organically started underwriting some bigger deals together. And hey, did you see that deal? Did you see this deal? And we'd kind of go to each other with our conclusions on the deal. And a few months later, Paul was actually presented with a storage deal from a wholesaler, and he texted me and he said, hey, what do you think about self-storage? And I'd been looking into it a bit because I just wanted something with a bit more scale. And, we took it from there and we ran with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's great. So how does that even come about? Because those are different things of like, oh, I'm doing some flips here, I got some rentals, I'm doing this, and single families, all of a sudden like, hey, yeah, there's a storage, how about a storage facility? How did you come to that conclusion, Mike, of like, oh yeah, I think I do want to do this, or I did want to try this? Is it just like, I just want to go big or go home, or what kind of opened your mind up about that?
Yeah, that was basically it. I was a little frustrated with just the state of the market and what I was seeing as far as returns on residential real estate and just buy and holds. So I wanted something that scaled a bit more. So I started looking into commercial real estate, and it has a whole lot of advantages, and it was something that I felt was more well suited for me, at least in that time. And when Paul came to me with the storage deal, it was something I was already somewhat familiar with. And as Paul said, we both just really dug in, and Paul joined the mastermind, and ever since then we've just been pedal to the metal.
That's awesome. So Paul, what's been some of the biggest things that I guess let's start with kind of the mastermind part of it, of like kind of talking to people that are doing, I always put that out there, like make sure you're getting in a room with people that are doing what you want to be doing or what you are doing and stuff. So how much did you know anything about storage before joining that mastermind and before doing that first deal, or what was it for you that made that progression?
Yeah. So, I mean, what really for me made the progression is going through the pandemic and, March of 2020, right? everybody, quit working, and locked in our homes and what have you. And I was just scared to death. Everybody talks about how they lost everything in real estate. This is it for me. And I couldn't have predicted a pandemic. I didn't even know for the month of March, month of April, whether people were going to pay their rent or not.
Yeah.
And then the eviction moratorium came in. And now if they don't pay rent, I can't even get rid of them. Right. And so all of that really spooked me. And I was very, very fortunate throughout all of 2020. For the most part, my tenants paid their rent. But towards the end of 2020, I was like, man, I just don't know if this is really what I want to put all of my eggs in, because I'd always been on the path to leaving my W-2 job and being financially free off of cash flow from real estate. And so one of the things that I started looking into was self-storage. And I'm not even sure who kind of turned me on to it. I spent a lot of time on Facebook and Bigger Pockets and, networking with there's a few self-storage owners in Michigan that are in our Facebook group up in Michigan. And they sold all their single families. They 1031 them all into self-storage, and they're telling their success stories. And so I ran into Stacy Rossetti, is the name of the self-storage mastermind. And she was from Peachtree City, Georgia, which is where my wife and I lived, and our kids were born. And so really hit it off with her very well, explained the situation. Hey, I'm trying to diversify my real estate portfolio, and we just clicked. And so I went ahead and paid and joined her mastermind. And like from the start, it just made a lot of sense to me. I love, the way that self-storage is structured. If you've got a tenant that's not paying, there's no eviction moratorium preventing it. You just lock them out and then you auction their stuff. And and then just very similar to why people get into apartment buildings, right? Now you've got a whole bunch of tenants in one building that are paying. And if one unit is empty or not paying, it still cash flows, right? And that's the way self-storage is. And I think it's even better than apartments personally.
Yeah.
There's no toilet.
You're a storage guy, so you're going to say that.
I'm a storage guy now. As Stacy says, I'm a storage nerd, right? Because there's no toilets, there's no electricity or very little. And it's a very easy asset class to manage from that perspective. So that's why I got into it, was just I needed to diversify away from residential.
Yeah. And just to build on that too, storage is just less impacted by the economy in general, because even in a good economy, people are buying, they're moving around. So generally they're using storage, they're making more money. So they're buying more toys and they need to store it. And then in a recession, people say that storage is recession resistant. It's not quite recession proof because nothing is, but people are downsizing. And generally one of the last things that they get rid of is their stuff in their storage unit. They look at it just as a gym membership where it's just on auto pay every month. And, it's $50 or $100 a month. And it's one of the last things that are cut from their budget. So also with inflation, I mean, it goes along the same lines. If people have more money and they're buying more things, they're using storage more. And for us as storage operators, we're less prone to get hit with a long-term lease during inflation because all of our leases are month to month. So if inflation goes through the roof at any one period in time, we could reassess our strategy, we could reassess our rates, and we could raise them accordingly.
Yeah. So that's the thing. If anybody knows anything about America, I think in general, is like we all have way too much stuff. Like I don't care. Like my wife and I are pretty minimalistic, but we still have way too much stuff. Like everybody needs a place to put it. And Mike, like you said, they need a place to put it. But then also too, even if they get to that point of like, we don't need this anymore, like it's still going to roll over maybe a month, 2 months, a year, a little bit more than what they even need it and stuff. So
how many people tell me, "Oh man, you just raised my rates. I'm moving out next month." And then the next month, I'm moving out next month.
Yep.
It's very true.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. And that's what a lot of the storage people say. So one of my favorite, storage guys from here in Indianapolis is Scott Myers. And, he does a lot of education, does a lot of working with people and has a coaching program and stuff as well. But it basically comes down to it's tenants without toilets is what he likes to say. So you guys have both owned, single family rentals and have been through that and have had tenants and been through evictions and all this kind of stuff. Is that really like kind of the, I know Paul, you mentioned this, is that like kind of the glamour aspect of this is like you have multiple tenants in one area, but you're not dealing with you're not necessarily dealing with the people aspect of it, or the, going through all that stuff. It's kind of, it's a little bit easier to go through the eviction process. It's a little bit easier to kind of handle certain situations. You're not going to have all the rehab. You're not going to be having stuff like this. Like, what is that, the glamour side of being in storage?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about a rehab, I just finished up a burr in Indianapolis, and it's kind of the first burr that I've done post, stabilizing storage. And stabilizing storage is just so much easier.
Yeah.
There's just very little to it. And really, it's more about stabilizing the business and implementing processes that will stand, right? And that's so much easier than adding value to a residential, with LVP and new sinks and toilets and paint and all these things. It's, stabilize it and make sure that every tenant's paying, and put in a little bit of marketing so that everybody knows that it's there. And there's enough demand out there. There's actually more demand out there than there is storage. And so it's just, if you put in the right business processes, the tenants will come.
Let me ask you, Paul, as you were going through that burr that you just did, like throughout that process, where you're like, why am I doing this again? I need to focus on the storage unit right now.
Yeah, well, all along, and Mike and I talk daily, and I've told Mike's that, and there's been some frustrations with this most recent burr, and I said, I'm done. Like the wholesaler emails, I delete, I don't even look at them. I'm done, and I'm not buying another single family in Indianapolis, just because along the way, you run into these issues that just don't exist in storage, and I've had a few, right now I've got the veterans group quit paying the full amount for one of my tenants. I would have thought the veterans group would have been, very reliable.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things. You just cannot count on that, especially if you're trying to get out of your W-2 job. You can't count on that rent being in there.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got one tenant in one unit that quits paying, you've got a whole bunch of other units that are paying, and it's going to cash flow. And I think that's the glamour of it, right? Is that I'm not at the whim of, the government and the eviction moratorium, whether I can evict or not, eviction rules. I'm not at the whim of that. And I'm not at the whim of, my property management being able to rent it or not. It's just, you have a lot more control. I think I have a lot more control, and I feel more stable in storage than I did in my fairly large, residential portfolio.
Yeah. So no, that's awesome. And I just have this vision of, like, as you're talking about that and the evictions and stuff like that, like, of course there's the storage award TV shows and stuff like that. So have you guys been through that yet, where you've got to like auction off a unit yet?
Yeah. My parents asked me that same question, and I said, not yet. Fortunately, not yet.
We have had to do an eviction, believe it or not.
Yeah, we had to do an eviction, just circumstances.
Yeah.
And that was terrible. Like Mike will tell you, we found an eviction attorney and just ghosted us, or so very unique circumstances. But we've got a couple in our second facility that we suspect they're either ghosting us because they don't care about the stuff that's in there, or they may have passed away.
Yeah.
Because we can't get into contact with them.
Yeah.
And so I do think we have a few auctions in our future to get those units cleaned out and rentable again.
Yeah. Paul, sorry, I just have this vision of you actually just being the auctioneer and being like cutting it off and going about the bidding and stuff like that. But maybe that's just in my head. So Mike, we've talked a little bit about like kind of the benefits of, kind of going, storage versus single family, and kind of what you guys have been through, and, that kind of thing. What's some of as you guys have gone from buying these to getting them up and running and things like that, what's been some of the things that you guys have learned through this, or like, oh man, I didn't expect this, or man, this popped up and we weren't ready for this, or what's some of the lessons you've learned from that, going from buy to getting it ready?
Yeah, as Paul said, it's really building a business. So it's just learning those business tactics from your analysis and underwriting to your asset management. So just one example that we were just talking about, our first facility that we purchased in Indiana, the business plan on that was to develop what was already there. So there were 32 storage units and a 3,600 square foot warehouse. get all that up to market rent, and then build out an additional 7,200 square feet of storage. And that's how the business plan made sense. And we ran into a lot of difficulty with the county, which was super unexpected, in getting our build out approved. And fortunately, we did get it approved. But just as way of one example, just fine tuning your underwriting and not making any assumptions that you will be able to do a build out. So now moving forward, Paul and I never assume that. And we always look at what's there, and we ensure that our business plan is going to work based on what's there. And if a build out gets approved, then that's just gravy. But it's just learning those business tactics and fine tuning our asset management. There's a lot of powerful property management tools out there, so we could automate a lot of it. And it's just getting in there and getting familiar with those things, and automating rent raises, for example. We could set it so that every 6 to 9 months, your rent gets increased. And, maybe some other operators will just do it, on a whim, or whenever it gets cold outside. Maybe they'll forget, but anytime you're not raising rents and you're not keeping up with the market around you, you're really just leaving money on the table.
Yeah, and that's some of the things that we get out of that mastermind that I think a lot of operators that aren't part of a mastermind, they're not familiar with how the big, public storage, how they operate. These are the things that we have gotten out of this mastermind is, how to operate these as efficiently as possible and squeeze as much value out of them. So between our software and processes and stuff, we've set it up where we've been able to fill these up 100% full, and then raise the rents on them and maximize the revenue.
Yeah. So I've heard, I don't know, I'll kind of throw this out to you and maybe put you on the spot a little bit with this, but I've heard some storage people basically say like, hey, if you really want to be like kind of like 92 to 96% occupancy, because if you're at 100, you're not charging enough kind of thing. Is that what you guys see really with that?
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
Yep. That's absolutely. And Mike and I were just talking the other day that our little port facility is now 100% full. And Mike's like, well, that's a problem. And it is. Yeah. We've got to raise rents. And so I've got it set up where, we're going to raise rent. We just raised rents, I don't know, a few months ago, and it's 100% full. One of the things we weren't doing is, as it was filling up, changing the rents on vacant units. So, so that as it gets down to the very last unit that's available, that very last unit that's available is the most expensive unit in the facility. Yeah. And so, it's just polishing our processes and making sure that we're maximizing that revenue. And here in a couple more months in the fall, we're going to go through and we're going to raise rents on everybody. And we're expecting that there's going to be some vacancy, and we really want to try to keep it at 92, 96%.
Yeah, that's a great value add right there. Just knowing that kind of that little tip that you just threw in right there, like same thing that you get a hotel on hotels.com. If there's one hotel left, it's not going to be at the same rate if there was 10 hotels left, or, whatever it may be. So, if you guys don't mind sharing a little bit of, so you guys got this facility in Lawrence, Indiana. So outside of Indianapolis over there, is it up and running yet? Like it's good to go?
It's up and it's actually, we purchased it at 100% occupancy. Okay. So rents are far below market, and that's on our to-do list.
Awesome. So what, if you guys don't mind sharing, just give us a little bit of, and you have to share your exact numbers or anything like that, but what kind of return are you guys kind of expecting on that, of like where you guys, for someone that's thinking about, man, why is storage better than single family, other than not have to deal with tenants or any of this stuff? What kind of a return can people expect on what you guys doing, like right outside of Indianapolis here?
Yeah, the way we've structured our deals thus far, they've all been joint ventures, syndications, things of that nature. So generally speaking, we're bringing in some other investors to help us fund these projects. So on a deal like this, and really all of our deals, what we aim to do is provide our investors at least an 8% cash on cash return. And then similar to single families, we seek to burn it out essentially. So after we add value to the facility, and once we stabilize it, we'll look to refinance, and we always look to return at least 50% of our investors' capital, and that's a bare minimum. The goal is really to refi it all out. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at deals.
Nice, love it. So, and then one of my other questions too is, like, people got to be thinking about this as well with you guys. So Mike, you're living in New York. Paul, you're living in Michigan, traveling around all over the place right now. Paul is, so we never know where Paul's going to be. But so you guys are living out of state. You guys have these, these facilities in Indiana, Michigan, things like that. But like, for example, how do you go about basically putting the operations in place to run a facility? Like, neither one of you guys are in Lawrence or in Indianapolis right now. So how is this running at 100% occupancy and to be able to increase rents and make sure everybody's happy and stuff? How are you able to do that virtually?
Yeah, I'll take that one. My wife and I run the operations, kind of the tactical day-to-day operations of the facilities. And a lot of this comes from the mastermind, but we use software, storage management software that we pay for. It's cloud-based. It comes with a website. We have a marketing company that has done a website for us that kind of plugs into this software. And then, basically we've got, everything automated where, if Brian Snyder wants a self-storage unit in Lawrence, you'd go onto our website and you'd click, rent a unit. It's going to show you from our storage management software, it's going to show you on the website what's available and what the prices are. And all that comes from, like I said, our revenue management, our yield management coming through there. But you can click on the unit that's available, and it's going to allow you to sign a lease. We require tenant insurance. You can opt into our insurance or, indicate that you've got private insurance, and then you can rent our lock. We lease out or rent out our locks. And so once you've done all that and you sign a lease, it's the e-sign, like most investors, e-sign the lease. And then it's going to text you the code to the lock that you just rented that's on the unit. And then you drive over there and drive in and done, right? So there's no on-site management. There's no people on management. We do have in every market a boots on the ground person. Yeah. So kind of a maintenance jack of all trades. A lot of what they do is, overlocking. They do a little bit of maintenance. Door hasps need repaired, or maybe door springs need repaired, or we've got a person that mows. Mowing is a big problem in self storage. But other than that, there's no on-site management, right? Yeah. And that keeps the expenses low. We're able to completely automate it and manage it remotely. And Stacy Rossetti, the owner of the mastermind that we go, she travels. She lives in an RV. Yeah. And she's driving all around the United States, and her and her husband, they're big enough. They've got an office manager that's stationary, but the office manager runs all their facilities remotely as well, right? So they're just out driving around the United States in their RV, and they manage their self-storage business remotely, completely.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things too about the self-storage. You mentioned like a couple things there. There's always things that you can like kind of add on to that monthly fee as well. So you got the insurance, you got the, hey, we're going to rent the lock and rent the key, or, whatever it may be. There's always little things that you can kind of add on to bump up that rent to like that extra $10, $15, which it's needed. Yep. So that's good. Yep. So, one of the things you guys kind of both mentioned as well is as you're looking to, add on to this, or, kind of before you do before you burr it or refinance it or whatever, there's value add that you can always add to storage facilities. Can you guys go through some of those things of, we know like in a single family house that like, you want to value add, we can, change the garage into a bedroom, or add this to the kitchen, or whatever it may be, add another bathroom. What's some of that value add stuff that you can do for a storage facility?
Yeah, the most important is just right off the bat, raising your rents to market rate. Yeah. As we said, this Lawrence facility that we just closed, their rates are probably 50% of market. So we're going to go in there and we're going to raise those rates immediately. We're going to put our business plan into place as far as advertising. So when we do get those vacancies, we could fill them up with market rate tenants. There's a lot of other ancillary income that we could collect. So as Paul mentioned, we lease our locks, whereas a lot of operators sell their locks. We prefer to lease them and just get that monthly revenue. Tenant insurance, that's as passive as it could get. They just check a box and we're hooked up with an insurance provider who basically gives us a cut of the premium. And then more of a drastic way to add value is to build out. So that's something that we're doing in our LaPorte facility in Indiana, where we're building out 7,200 square feet of storage. And that's basically ground up on our land. So those are some of the ways to just increase the income. And then there's obviously decreasing the expenses. So a lot of these operators, all the operators that we've purchased from have been mom and pops. So they don't run the business quite as efficiently as maybe Paul and I do. And they're not as up to date with some of the technology, and some of the stuff that Paul mentioned is really powerful, where you could have encrypted locks. And, we're putting in a gate at one of our facilities. So as soon as a tenant is a day late on their rent, that gate code is going to change and they won't even be able to access the facility, let alone their unit. So all those things really help with optimizing expenses and keeping vacancy and collections high.
Yeah. So love it. So one of the last things before we got about 5 minutes left on here and stuff, but I do want to touch on this before we get out of here is like, so, you see you guys are operating this virtually and, you guys are seeing success with it and stuff like that. And it's storage units and storage facilities, I think, allow you to do this virtually with the systems they have in place. I want to know how you guys are kind of operating this partnership, doing this, kind of away from each other and stuff like that. Like, you guys aren't neighbors, you guys aren't living beside each other. Can't you just go knock on the door and go visit somebody? But how are you guys allowing this kind of partnership to work and kind of this, develop and also take on these more deals and kind of looking for what you're going to do in the future and stuff like that? So how's that going? And how are you guys managing to be able to do that? Is it just staying in constant communication, or what are some of the tips for that? Paul, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take just a little bit of it. So Mike is the deal guy. He's very well networked with brokers and wholesalers and stuff. And a lot of our deals are two of the three have come through those contacts. But Mike also is very well networked with lenders. I guess all of our lenders have come through Mike's contacts. They love him. And so, he's really handled a lot of the paperwork and vetting lenders and getting them on board. Obviously I'm involved and we make decisions together on, which lender we want to go with, but, he's pretty aggressive with trying to get the best terms possible out of lenders. And the more we do this, the more it seems like the lenders are, more amenable to that. And so kind of on the front end, finding the deals and sourcing the deals and funding the deals and closing, a lot of that is Mike, right? Getting insurance in place is Mike. There's a lot of attorney stuff. Mike is an attorney in Manhattan. A lot of that is Mike. And then on the back end, once we own the facility, utilities and management and dealing with tenants and the management software and setting all that up, the rent roll, and there's a handoff that just took place with Lawrence. Now it was Mike's deal that we were getting to the closing table. I went to the closing table, and then it's really on me and my wife to stabilize this, get rents raised, get everybody, and if we have vacancy. Luckily, I've got some really great boots on the ground that we're going to coordinate with to get some of the things done at Lawrence that we need done. But then, Mike's out of it, right? I mean, he's aware of it. We stay in contact and talk about it and things that we need to be done. But really, for the most part, Mike doesn't have to talk to tenants, doesn't have to deal with people not paying. He's off finding the next deal and getting the next deal financed. And, we really are in that position. I know, while we were taking storage call today, Mike was, sending emails back and forth on our number 4 facility in Whiteland that I think, Mike, we're under contract now.
We are
officially under contract.
Congrats.
I walked the facility while I was in Indy before I came down to Nashville here. But, at some point when we close on that facility, I'll take that over and we'll start, stabilizing it there. And so, the LaPorte facility and the facility in Michigan, Mike's really not too involved. I'd say maybe 10% of his time is involved. There's a few coordination things with contractors and stuff like that. For the most part, really not too much involved. And it's really the same way for me on the front end. I'm involved a little bit, maybe 10 or 20% of my time is on the front end where we're financing it and working through all the numbers and underwriting it and, putting together budget, how much we need to raise. Often, like on Lawrence, I never really knew how much we needed to raise. I was just bringing people to the, hey, I got this person, I got that person. And he's like, okay, we need to raise this much. And I think it was 3 days before close. I didn't even know what the cash to close was, And the other thing that I do is Mike calls me the CFO, but I keep all of our books. So my dad was a CPA, and it seems like I have an affinity for keeping records. I love the idea of being able to write off all of our losses and, stuff like that. So I keep all of our QuickBooks, keep all that straight and all the receipts that come in and keep the books up to date as part of the operations as well. So that's kind of how we divided it, is the closing tables when things switch over.
I love that. I think it's so important just on partnerships in general. I worked with multiple partners and stuff, and it's like been like sometimes their roles just kind of clash. They don't know what it is. It's clear that you guys have defined kind of like, hey, this who's done this, who's doing this, and who's responsible for this, and things like that. And that goes a long way. Just so you're not stepping on each other's toes, and you guys trust each other through that, which is incredible when it comes to a partnership. So, Mike, I do have to ask you though, and you can add on to any Paul stuff on the partnership and how it works here, but I got to ask you. So Marie's kind of famous for basically like kind of naming all these cutesy little names around Indianapolis. Is she naming these storage facilities as well?
Oh man, I don't think we have names for our storage facility. I mean, they've all been
disappointed
branded
on that. You can let her know I'm disappointed on that.
I'll let her know. They've all been branded our facility name, which is Bigger
Yeah.
Garage. So they haven't had a nickname outside of that.
Yeah.
But just building on what Paul said, I think that's one of the reasons that our partnership has worked so well is that we do have complementary skill sets, and we sort of just fell into things that we were good at and things that we liked to do. And we're fortunate that there wasn't much overlap there, and it really covers all of our bases here. So, the one thing that I'll add on to that is just raising money and bringing investors to the table. That's a huge part of the business that we're operating, because like I said, most of our deals are joint ventures and syndications. So that's something that we've been able to split up pretty well.
Yeah. So love it. All right. Before we get you out of here and stuff like that, I would love you guys to just give me each your like elevator pitch for like why storage facilities over single families or multifamily or anything. Why storage units the way to go, Paul? What's your elevator pitch for that, man?
All right. My elevator pitch is economies of scale. So you got a lot of doors and a lot of tenants. And if one's gone, it's not going to kill you. And then if you've ever been screwed by a residential appraisal, commercial's where it's at. So yeah, that's my elevator pitch.
There you go. So Mike, how about you?
And I'll just, before I give my pitch, there's things you could do actually to help you with the appraisal. And there's things that we've done because we've been in a situation where the appraiser didn't want to appraise our property for what we thought it should appraise for. And we were able to hand them a report with a whole bunch of data and income and expense numbers. And it's a little different than residential. It's not, oh, this place has granite, this place has butcher block, this place has 2 bath, this one has 1. I mean, you're really just looking at data and numbers. So as long as you present it to them in a cohesive way and you make it short and concise, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. So fortunately, there are things you could do, and maybe that's part of the pitch to ensure that you don't have to deal with as many appraisal issues. But my main pitch would be inflation resistant, recession resistant, and just not as many emergencies. So given that there are no toilets and it's really just 4 walls and a roof, even if there is a maintenance update that's needed, it's usually not emergent.
Yeah. So love it. So, and Mike, I want to throw this over to you before we get off here too, since you're the front end guy of these deals and stuff. If somebody wants to reach out to you to learn more about what you're doing, they're interested in, lending, they're interested in syndications, they're interested in sending you a deal. How do they get in contact with you? What's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, Paul and I both have a social media presence. You can find us there. You could also feel free to visit our website, biggergarage.com. All of our contact information is there. Paul and I are starting a fund, so we'd be excited to chat.
Awesome. Sounds great, fellas. Thank you so much for your time. Great value, great insights today on storage facilities. Really appreciate that. And if anybody needs anything from me, you can reach out to me at brian@simplewholesaling.com. More than happy to help you out. And with that, that's a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod. And we will see you guys next time. Take care.